So, just before we went on a break, you had mentioned ukuthi there is fears within the movement, ukuthi if you decide to stand for a cause, who's going to stand with you? While it's at the same time, our movements are important. We need them to stand with us. So, looking also at the other movements outside Zimbabwe, how they've worked, what they've achieved, and bringing it back home here, what can you then borrow from them, ensuring which corner the movement is strong? The fear, at least, we cannot completely eliminate it, but at least we can reduce it.
From my thinking around the LBQ movement specifically is to say we need to organize ourselves and we need to have structures in place and some guiding documents as to what we're working on, what we want to advocate for, what is it that we want to achieve in 2030, for example. So I feel like as the movement is something that we need to get our house in order to do, in Zimbabwe specifically. And when we have that moving, it's then going to be easy for us to join other existing movements that are already there. Not to say that we are not there, but it would also be very good to join them and say, this is what we want to do. And first of all, these are women's issues. And when we go in and support or align with other women's issues or other women's movements, at least we are achieving a certain goal together. So for me, it's to get that movement going correctly, right? And then joining other movements that are there, that are in support or in line with what we want to do. So if we have a vision, if we have a goal of what to do, we will not be all over the place. We will not be found all over, even if we have representation at regional level, it is known Zimbabwe wants to achieve A, B, C, D. Right now, everyone probably just go and represent or speak on what they want to achieve, probably on an organizational level or on a personal level. But if we want to take our advocacy forward, because advocacy is the process to policy change. And the process doesn't happen overnight. It happens with direction, with order, with coordination. So I feel like we need to really put our house in order with regards to it. Doesn't matter who's leading, as long as we're getting to where we want to go. Then from there, we can talk about anything else. For me, if we get that part right, I'll be very happy.
All right. Speaking of having our houses in order, this is generic, right? But then we also have our individual houses that we're running within our institutions and getting them into order. Are there any principles that we are borrowing from other houses that are functioning and running that we can also adapt into our houses to put our particular houses in order?
Yes, I think what we can borrow, is what is really critical at this moment is evidence. I think in Zimbabwe we do not have any data that speaks to LBQ women. We've got size estimates for female sex workers, we've got size estimates for MSM, but we do not have any size estimate for LBQ women. I think when we get to that point of achieving that, I think we're able to really organize and really stand up for ourselves as LBQ women.
There's something about the LBQ movement that we, and this is where the fear stems from. I think because when it comes to backlash, particularly for queer women or LBQ women, it's usually fizzled in with sexual violence, and we need to find ways of ending that cycle where young activists come up and they find themselves being targeted, whether by individuals, family, or whoever. And that's where the fear stems from, because there have been activists who have been sexually violated, mainly because they're activists. And I think we need to find ways. It's very difficult. Also because most of these cases go unreported because of the nature of the attacks. And I think we need to have some sort of way of protecting each other and ourselves. I don't know how we can do it, but really that's where the fear comes from. And that's where the difference is, particularly because with MSM it's just physical violence and it ends there. But with LBQ women, there's that added layer of sexual violence, which is very disempowering and silencing. And that's where the challenge comes from. I don't know, maybe we can brainstorm, or that's a question for another day. But how do we end that cycle of young activists coming up, some very radical, and then being silenced using sexual violence?
All right. At an institutional level, since all of us are working within institutions in advocacy, you've mentioned it, there are violences that women are facing. And that's what also feeds to that fear whereby it silences them and they don't speak. And I always like to look at Audre Lorde, her theory, her work about dismantling the master's house, and how she says how we can use the master's tools, those that fear, that intimidation, that discrimination, how we can then use it to empower us instead of us always crying the victims. How can we then take that victimization and turn it into strength towards pushing our particular movement? So at an institutional level, I'm an individual, I've been silenced. As institutions that are within this advocacy movement, do you have any structures in place to at least motivate and keep encouraging the individuals that are silenced, so that also the movement just doesn't die down within the individuals as well?
Basically on my side, I think it's more on the health sector, advocacy here and there. But on my point of view, I say continuous education will help us. Peer education. Let's talk more. Let us not meet in such a long time to say let's meet once a year. Let's continuous education. The young ones, the upcoming ones. If we continuously engage and teach each other and help with each other with knowledge and information, I'm sure we're going to make it.
All right, so is it something that we see plausible happening and going on, also keeping in mind the kind of environment that we are in currently as a country? Or is it something possible that we can have those frequent wellness meetings and if they are not happening, what is standing in the way? How do we overcome that hurdle?
Okay. Well, allow me to say this. When we say that for us to strive within any environment and for us to continuously do our wellness, do ABCD, the truth is we then need funding, which has been the biggest gap with regards to LBQ movements. If we have that, we can see that our other counterparts are able to do it. They are striving in advocacy, they are striving in spaces, they are doing ABCD. It's just not because they are more organized than we are. That's not true. It's because they have the financial muscle to move things around. Whether we like it or not, money makes things move around. Money makes things, for us to even begin to meet with policymakers, to even begin to meet with decision makers, we cannot go there empty-handed. We need a financial muscle to get things done, to get things through. For us to reach to the person, or say Cholocho, or say Guy, you cannot just ask Mary to walk from Harare to Guy. We will need then money for Mary to move from Harare to Guy to go and meet with a particular LBQ women and we do ABCD. So eventually, the biggest fear, I would say, or the biggest hindrance to anything that will make LBQ progress, whether it's advocacy, whether it's in society, it is money. It will drive us to a particular point, but at least it will get us closer. So if we're able to get that, whether it's a collective, whether it's an individual, whether it's RAO, whether it's sister, whether it's FOFO, if we can get that together, if we put our resources together for a particular goal, I think we can start talking about borrowing principles, borrowing ABCD to make whatever we're trying to do work. So probably the biggest question that comes from me, how do we then resource our movements? How then resource the data that we need? We are here because the challenge that we have, the biggest challenge that we have, the generation is data. But then how are we able to resource that data on our own? How can we do that so that when we have the little data that we have, we can use it to get more money, to get the biggest data that we have? So eventually, in as much as funding is the biggest hindrance that we have, It's also about working together collectively, also about putting our resources together. It's also about finding ways to get what we can in the little box that we can, and trying to get money for the bigger things. Because eventually, without money, I wouldn't even have came here and come back here. That's the truth.
All right. Yes, while I'm understanding which one lack of funding is a very big issue. Maybe yeah. Before we even get, money becomes the bigger picture. But those little pieces, brushes, painters, you're painting the picture. Is it something that we can maybe try and run with money? Is it something that we think we are savings, or for us as a movement?
If we are committed, we can do it. This is what I believe. If we are committed and if we want to, if we are not putting politics first, if we are not putting personal interest first, if we are not being selective on who knows the table to this voluntary thing, I think we can do it. I believe we can do it. If we are taking the young people, the older generation, the middle generation, whatever generation exists, if we put it together and say, can we do this at little to no resources we have, so that we go to people. I believe we can do it as long as we put the politics aside and we put the grouping thing aside. I think we can come together and do a very impressive thing.
And that makes me come to think that one of the challenges that we have as a movement is fear of funds being thrown from us. One person will feel they lose funding if one goes this way, one goes this way. So why not form a collective, a big movement for Zimbabwe, and to say we are coming together?
Alright, so we'll have a competition within the movement. What is at the end of the day, we're pushing towards the same goal.
And Konoko, it probably becomes a hindrance to movement yet. Even the network it will make sense even when we want to apply for funds. Get to our right, where is your memorandum of understanding with everyone else? Where is where is the constitution? Where is, if all these things are there, these are the little things, if all these things are there, I assure you we can get someone. We can do something. But we cannot know what they're not. So chairperson mobile. So our secretary mobile. So if we can get the politics aside, I assure you we can get somewhere. Ukuthi Rouse isibizele lapha ya coordinator and sesiyenze live locally enhle kakhulu. Ubuluse editile kwaba amazing. And then so uhanjisa the lava lines. And then now we get bigger monies. And then we want to coordinate. Obviously the problem which why is our coordinator. And that is not even what we want to be fighting. We want to be fighting first of all, what is it that we want to achieve? What are our issues? We have been excluded in a lot of things. We want to be included, and this is how we want to do. If we can start from there, it means that if you or the 8 years, once I feel out the 18 years, we are making progress. I think if we start having those honest conversations in our donor-funded programs, then that was somewhere.
All right.
I think also any challenge about corner is how, as a movement, we've been distracted. You know, like someone looks at you and says, those people, if they coordinate and really come together, they might do something. So we become distracted by these external forces, which are whoever or whatever they may be. And we start thinking, okay, so when we call it, what do we call each other? Then we have 2 months of deciding what we call ourselves. And then after that, who's chairing? But what is the need for that? So I think we have, at this time, we have an opportunity, because I will tell you this, the religious fundamentalist is organizing. They are organizing and they are making inroads into every African country. And particularly in Zimbabwe, there's a growing appetite for what they have to offer. if you can see the conversations happening online, there's a lot of allusion to God this, God that, God that. And these people are not coming from nowhere. They are funded and they want to give their movement mileage. And we are thinking, oh, who's going to change? So, and before we know it, we have a very dire situation. And then we start panicking when we don't even have access to money anymore because our bank accounts have been frozen or something. And then we're like, no, guys, we need to meet. And then we are borrowing money for data to talk on WhatsApp. It's not working. But we have an opportunity right now to coordinate ourselves and really come up with something that's creating a solid front. And I totally agree with you. So let's not think about the petty things.
And I say, Bulawayo has said it. Let's move.
Thank you.
Bulawayo has said it.
No, it's interesting how you've mentioned Obutibule, the religious movement. That is a movement in itself. It's moving, it's growing, it's working, and that means they're doing something right. One is we're saying which Konatina, as the LPQ movement, we are stuck on focusing on the petty things, Aniti. Remember I spoke with Audrey Lord about talking about the master's house. That becomes the master's house, the religious sector, Aniti. And surely there is something that they're doing right in there. Is it something that you can look at, what is it about Pushai? What's making their movement grow? That's attracting them to then get money to push for their movement. That we can say, you know what, we can borrow from that.
Proper coordination.
Coordination, yes.
There's proper coordination. Whatever is it that we need to do, Tina's like a sububadi, when they've done it, and there is order. And that was just Bishop is leading this. And as long as the movement is going, people are okay with it. And this is why they're growing, this is why they're attracting funding from left, right, and center. But Tina, we're busy saying, so, why are you winji? But is it taking us anywhere? No. Do we take that time to actually make Islam bigger? Or we take that time to go over petty things? Or we take that time to go over politics? Are we able to meet and say, this is the agenda, and we stick to it? If there is need to be democratic and vote for chairperson and vice president, let us do so. But let's just move. I think if we are not organized, if you don't this is organized. I can put 10,000.
I think I do agree with you, Vincent, but I think also the other biggest challenge that we have as the LPQ movement is our issues are sensitive. I think culturally and religiously we are seen as taboo. We are demonic. I think also that's the other biggest challenge that we face. No one wants to identify with LPQ. Even our allies, our support systems, they come, but they got that fear that Namba was mentioning. But even I'm seeing attending meetings of LPQ, what will people say? What will my church say? What will my followers say? What will they say in my workspace? Am I not identifying with this person? I think that's the other challenge where we do not really get that support that we require as a movement.
All right.
And also I think, just to let you know, I think because we are women, it's like there's that element of saying how dare you have sex and enjoy without men involved. How dare you start organizations and direct such organizations? Director Mkazi, Director Makazi, where are the men? We need men. So I think that's where the challenge is. I remember there was a time as well we went to the meeting at one place, and the one guy, so he asked us, what do you guys do? So since straight enough, we tell him. Then he says, as women only, where are the men? Who's the men? So there's that idea that women can't do anything without men. And I think that's where the challenge is as well.
Oh, that's interesting. So, like the saying goes, our biggest fear is not that we are inadequate, but it's because we are powerful beyond measure. And for us, as women, and even as LPQ women, there's that challenge whereby we're being either blocked or we're not even conscious of that power that we hold within ourselves. We'll take another break and then we'll come back into our last segment as we continue this discussion.